The CASCADES project is an EU Horizon 2020 funded project that looks at how climate impacts that initiate in one part of the world might cascade cross borders and create impact elsewhere in the world.
It is a comprehensive project which brings leading expertise on climate impacts on international finance, international trade, commodity trade, and it is also looking into the foreign policy, security issues, and it is trying to understand these impacts of climate change between European Union and its neighborhood, especially between the European Union, North Africa and Middle East.
EU's overall policy approach is inspired by the EU Green Deal, which cannot be looked at in isolation. It has an external dimension. That is why we aim to encourage, based on the framework that we have in place, regional cooperation within regions and with the EU. And as part of that, we are also implementing concrete actions on the ground. That is with UN agencies, that is with civil society organizations, aimed at conflict prevention, peace building, crisis response, and in particular also paying due attention to the needs of vulnerable groups, including women, children and refugees.
This workshop here in Istanbul is part of the recommendations phase of the project. We're drawing together the findings of the CASCADES project so that they can be represented to European stakeholders and help them to deal with the issue of cascading climate risks in a more informed, more constructive way. The workshop has brought together academics, researchers with European stakeholders for dialogue about these issues to further understanding. It will also feed into the recommendations and make sure that those are informed by voices from outside of Europe.
As a part of this comprehensive project, we are working on a work package on the Euphrates-Tigris river basin because climate change has a very direct impact on water use and water situation, and Euphrates-Tigris is a transboundary river basin, and there has been pressures on the river basin already from the use from the different riparian states, increasing use due to population growth, due to socioeconomic needs for agricultural development and energy production. So climate change is actually adding more complexities and uncertainties to this already stressed river basin. And because the increase in use has been a problem, and uncoordinated and competitive use, the riparian states, namely Turkey, Iraq, and Syria, had to find a way to settle their issues on transboundary water management. And they had been negotiating on this water resource since they started the large-scale dam building projects about the construction and the filling of the dams, and they made it as an institutional structure back in the 1980s as a joint technical committee, and they also managed to sign water allocation agreements, but these agreements are not helpful to deal with the impacts of climate change. In order to reach the aims of the project, the CASCADES, the region needs multilateral agreements involving stakeholders and also very much responding to the impacts of climate change, because climate change has a direct impact on the flow of the river, the temperatures, and the existing agreements should be adjusted to the impacts of climate change by involving other stakeholders more than states, like private sector, civil society, and international agencies.
For the European Union, climate change is a very high priority. Challenge that both the Middle East and Europe face related to climate change is what we have in common. It's a common challenge, so it is important that we find ways to in a multilateral manner, look at that, and that is exactly what CASCADES stands for, to look at the effects of climate change on, among other things, peace and security. As the European Union, we are keen to use the evidence-based recommendations from the CASCADES engagement that of course need to be fed into the overall policy-making machine, and at the same time also serve to inform what we can do on the ground in terms of concrete climate adaptation projects with our partners. And the takeaway from us, from the recommendations put forward by Cascades, is to make sure that the conflict-related work gets more climate sensitive. So that is something we will have to build in the near future more and more.